Hello, I'm Nathan P. Butler, author of a Saga on home video and host from the Star Wars Home Video Library here on YouTube, and this is Star Wars Home Video Year by Year. This time we take a look at 1982, and that is a momentous year for Star Wars on home video. Not so much in theaters, right? The original Star Wars film, which did get its subtitle and episode number as A New Hope in 1981, had been in theaters in 77, 78, 79, and 81. The Empire Strikes Back had been in theaters in 80 and was re-released, though I didn't mention it last time, in 81. It would also be re-released here in 1982 as well. But the important part in relation to home video for those is that there really wasn't a way to watch full versions of either film up to this point. For both films, you could watch Super 8 reels of selected scenes. For A New Hope, you could watch things with the Star Wars Movie Viewer, little crank thing with about a minute of footage per cartridge. And of course, in other regions, you had stuff like the mini Cinex and whatnot. And there were behind-the-scenes specials being released, but not really actual full versions of the films. That changes in 1982, at least for A New Hope. Empire will have to wait another couple of years. Now, I will say that this may be one of our longer episodes here because it is such an important year and there's a lot of stuff to show, but I will try to still keep it pithy. And again, if you want more information on any of the stuff being shown here, check out the description where there'll be links to episodes from the Star Wars Home Video Library here on YouTube that focus on these things, and it'll tell you where to find information about them if they are in there, which for the most part they are, in either a Saga on Home Video First Edition or Second Edition. So just 2 days after the 5th anniversary of A New Hope hitting theaters on May 27, 1982, you could, well, rent the film to watch at home. You couldn't actually legally buy it at this point, but you could at least rent it on 2 of the 4 primary formats of the so-called Great or First Format War in the US. The formats that will be involved in that conflict we'll see here: VHS, Beta, LaserDisc, and CED. But we'll start with the ones that were released for rental in May of 1982. You're probably familiar with these because most of the time these are the ones that we see most often on places like eBay. Those were the so-called video rental library releases on VHS and Beta in the United States. We are still at this point, and really only to this point, seeing Beta releases in smaller packages than VHS, rather than just a VHS package with a bunch of extra padding and stuff like that. Now, interesting to note with these, there is a serial number on the back. The actual cassettes have a matching serial number on the back. And if you find one of these cassettes, you will find that the legalese on the label is much denser because it's much more about the rental process than it is about just regular copyright stuff that we tend to see on most releases. So this would be a VHS. I don't know that I've ever showed you a real comparison of these. This is what a VHS looks like, kids. Beta was the same way with the serial number stuff going on here. This is a Beta cassette. Notice the size comparison here between VHS and Beta. Now, those were just the bare bones film, no extras, no trailers, or anything like that. Not even for Revenge of the Jedi, as it was being called at the time, which this year's re-release in theaters of A New Hope, yes, again, actually came with. They actually showed that trailer along with the re-release of A New Hope in theaters. But here, bare bones, just the cassette with the film, and that's it. You couldn't actually purchase it, or you weren't supposed to, but a lot of places did what are referred to as lifetime rentals, where basically they would rent it to you and just say you don't have to ever actually bring it back. Usually for about a 50% markup of what retail would eventually be later in the year. The rental phenomenon, by the way, was not just limited to the US. We also have, for example, versions out of the UK that are like that, or out of Australia that are typically VHS and Beta. More on UK formats in a moment. So, of course, let's take a look at retail. And that starts not with VHS and Beta. They were actually the last to hit retail in the US. There were 2 formats that beat them to the retail punch, even though they beat the other formats to rental, because there really wasn't much of a rental market for LaserDisc or CED. The first out of the gate came in June of 1982, just a month after the rental versions hit VHS and Beta, and that is LaserDisc. This is that original Star Wars LaserDisc release for A New Hope. You notice here it's from 20th Century Fox Video, as were those rental copies. That label won't even last the year here. But this is the original release, and this is a single LaserDisc. If you're not familiar with what a LaserDisc looks like, it looks like this. It is a giant, almost LP vinyl-sized disc that is essentially like a giant CD, if that's a good comparison to make for those who aren't familiar with the format. There were two different ways you could have a LaserDisc, CLV or CAV. Constant linear velocity or constant angular velocity, also usually just referred to as extended play or standard play. A standard play disc can only fit half an hour of content on either side. Yes, you flipped these or you had to have a player that automatically switched sides for you. But if you had a CLV disc, an extended play disc, you could fit an hour on either side, which was nice from the standpoint of not having a lot of discs to lug around or to purchase, which kept the price a little bit lower. The thing about it, though, is that even 2 hours of content total across two sides doesn't actually get the entirety of A New Hope onto a LaserDisc. So how is this a single disc for the entire film? It is due to a process referred to as time compression. Basically, the films are shot in 24 frames per second, FPS. Okay? And then the NTSC format for home viewing was 30 FPS. So what they would do is they would have to do a conversion type thing anyway, like a 3:2 kind of conversion, pull down they called it, to be able to convert it from 24 to 30 to hit home video anyway. But in that process, what they would do is take some frames out here and there imperceptibly, so that once you ran it with those frames missing, it shortened the duration of the film just enough to fit within that 2-hour time frame of a two-sided LaserDisc. Not terribly noticeable unless you put it side by side with, say, a VHS and play them together, because eventually they will go out of sync. But it was a nice way to keep the cost down and give us a LaserDisc release on one CLV disc for A New Hope in 1982. The first retail release of A New Hope in the US ever. And while we're kind of on the subject of the whole time compression thing, I would note that other regions did get this as well. This is one from the UK from 82. The important thing to note here, and the reason why I bring this up specifically, is that we are familiar with this idea, at least if we know anything about home video back in the day, that there were different formats for different regions, NTSC and PAL being the primary ones. You also had CCAM for France, primarily. But there's a difference between being able to fit a 2-hour movie onto one CLV LaserDisc in the US versus, say, in the UK, where it's also a single disc. In the US, it's by taking out the frames here and there to go from 24 frames per second to 30, but then in that process, still manage to whittle it down to fit in 2 hours. That's not the case with a PAL release, like this out of the UK, because their standard is just 25 frames per second, just one more than what it's shot in. So all they do is they just speed it up. They do what's called PAL speed up, and instead of going 24 frames per second, it's 25. The film moves a little faster, it's a little bit shorter, it fits on a single LaserDisc, but it does mean that the audio is pitched a little bit higher, almost imperceptibly, but you can't hear it if you know what to look for. But again, it's a way of compressing down the film for a different format. In this case, for PAL, not necessarily LaserDisc, just PAL in general. Then no new release of the film in July, skip to August, and we get another format in the US, CED, Capacitance Electronic Disc. This is a relatively poorly known format, but again, like a LaserDisc, it's an hour on either side of the disc, but the disc is actually inside here. What you would do is you'll take this, slide it into your player, it will click into little things here on the caddy, and or the frame, and you'll pull the caddy, as the big part is called out, that looks like a big old floppy disk or a save icon, I guess. Pull it out, the disc stays inside the player. When you're done, slide it back in, it attaches, you pull it out, the disc is back inside. Kind of inventive for what it is, but it is a vinyl format using a specialized stylus on home video, not just audio. So again, it would go in, and this frame, gotta be careful, it's old, would come out, and within this frame is the actual movie. A vinyl disc inside this plastic caddy. We will see another format like this soon out of Japan called VHD, but this is a CED for the United States. Then in September, we finally get retail releases on VHS and Beta of the film, which again had already been available for rental on those formats, but not yet for retail. This is that first release. These are actually harder to come by now than those rental versions, probably because this is a drawer case made out of cardboard rather than those thick protective clamshell cases. So again, you have a serial number on the back for these, It is a drawer case, as I said, so a drawer case means that when you open it, it's like a drawer. Okay? You got this thing inside it that actually holds the cassette. The cassette looks very much like what you saw for rental, except the legalese has been changed and simplified because it's more about, watching at home and just the copyright aspect of it rather than all the explanation about rental and who officially owns the rental and so on, like we saw in the earlier one that year. There, of course, is your matching tag. Then there is a beta version of it. I would note here the big deal about the beta version, though, is that, as you'll notice, it's basically just in a package the same size now as the VHS. It's just got more space taken to be able to kind of squeeze in and actually hold the beta cassette. We will see that from here on out pretty much in the US, beta is just in the same packaging as VHS with some extra padding. Now, one thing I would note that's pretty interesting about this in the UK as a parallel is this right here. Okay, yeah, so it's a clamshell. Most VHS releases in the UK will continue to be in clamshells when the US is going to cardboard. Fine. Looks like the rental version just with no rental tag. Yeah, whatever, what's the big deal? What's the big deal is this. In the UK, there was an entire other magnetic tape format that was being used at the time that doesn't have a US equivalent. So in the UK, you might have gotten what's referred to as a VCC or V2000 or Video 2000 cassette as well. And you would think that would be it for releases of A New Hope in the US because there's only 4 major formats in the format war at this point in time. VHS, Beta, LaserDisc, CED. But I mentioned that those names were changing previously. We looked at magnetic video kind of being swallowed up and eventually being reworked as part of a 20th Century Fox video, which is what we see for these here. Well, the changes were still continuing, and by the end of the year, 20th Century Fox Video and CBS Video would merge into CBS Fox Video. Well, the change of labeling to CBS Fox Video won't happen for LaserDisc or VHS or Beta until 1983. But it does happen at the end of 1982 for CED, making it the first Star Wars home video release of a full Star Wars film to bear the CBS Fox Video branding in the US. If I hold them up for comparison here, this is the one from earlier in the year, this is the one from late in the year, right? Both CEDs, both one disc, time compressed, fits the entire film, 20th Century Fox Video branding, CBS Fox Video branding. The rebranding had begun. You see the same thing on the other side and so forth. And we will see this happen a lot where there will be a company name change that changes the branding on a given home video release. Even if the content itself hasn't changed, there's a branding change to the packaging and maybe sometimes with a little branding at the beginning of the format itself, like the beginning of a VHS cassette, perhaps might say CBS Fox Video. But by and large, the films themselves aren't changing. We won't see the films change for a while. But believe it or not, that is not all there is to talk about 1982. We have a little bit more still to go. Recall that in 1981, the last episode, we saw this released in the US, where it was the making of Star Wars and SPFX The Empire Strikes Back, combined into a single Laserdisc that is a double feature. I also noted that SPFX The Empire Strikes Back would not get any individual releases in the US, only as part, for example, of the double feature here. And this is from Magnetic Video Corporation. Well, in 1982, we get a new release in the US, which is this. Again, Magnetic Video is gone. It's been pulled in and sort of reorganized, and now we have 20th Century Fox Video, and here is the 20th Century Fox Video version of The Making of Star Wars and SPFX The Empire Strikes Back. Effectively the same thing, just put out on a new Laserdisc. And sometimes people will get a little confused because they say, wait a second. Yeah, that's obvious 20th Century Fox, sure. But I've seen this, and I'd swear it didn't say Magnetic Video. I swear it say 20th Century Fox Video on it. That is because of another release in 1982, but this was out of Japan, which is this. It looks a lot like that 1981 US version, but this is the Japanese version. You can tell because it says 20th Century Fox Video, and when you actually have it with its obi, as it's called, it'll have this little thing up here on the corner as well. But if you ever find someone confused, be like, wait a second, this is the US one. I know it because of, well, no, actually. It's all English. But no, this is the Japanese version. You can tell by the label, and you can tell by Japanese text underneath the title on the disc label. And this was also a big multi-format year for that double feature, because in the US, not only did we get a LaserDisc version of it, we also got a beta version of it here. Now that similar packaging, drawer case, as we saw there with the New Hope, and a VHS version of the same thing shown on CED as well. Notice there's a white case here. Typically with CED, a blue case meant stereo, a white case meant mono, but by the end of the life cycle, that was all out the window. They were just using whatever ones they had left in stock to produce the last CEDs. But for now, at least, this is a good indicator of mono because of the white here. And finally, as maybe Stumacher from Scream might say, but wait, there's more! There's two more things we want to look at here very quickly coming out of the UK. We will see eventually that the UK will get SPFX The Empire Strikes Back released by itself, but in 1982, they re-released The Making of Star Wars by itself. Again, not a big deal, nothing fancy, it's just a VHS release, but wait, what is this companion piece? I'm assuming there was beta as well, but what is this? That's right, another VCC/Video 2000/V2000 release. Early on, we do see quite a few of these VCC/Video 2000/V2000 releases in the UK for Star Wars products. They'll be gone within a few years, but there are a few early on, and perhaps other than Video 8, Video 2000 is the second most difficult to find Star Wars home video item or format for collectors right now. It is much easier to find pretty much anything other than Video 2000 or Video 8. Again, Video 8 takes top spot. V2000 is a very close second. If you happen to run into one of these, snag it because they are pretty rare. And that wraps up the momentous 1982 in terms of Star Wars home video. Next time we see that CBS Fox Video rebranding continue to spiral through other products as we take a look at 1983.